and welcome back to my channel. So today we have something super highly requested that I haven't spoken about in a hot minute. We have my 5 top tips for building your booty. So I've created videos talking about glute growth, talking about my go-to booty exercises in the past, but obviously my knowledge has expanded massively over the past couple of years, and I really wanted to create a video with 5 concise, memorable points in them so you guys can always come back to this video. So tip numero uno, we have glute activation. So I know this might seem super obvious to someone who knows a little bit about training and glutes and whatnot, but if you are someone who is a complete beginner, you may have no idea how important it is to wake up your booty. Obviously there are exceptions, but a lot of us are sat on our bums all day long. Like, a lot of people have office jobs, and when you come to training the glutes, they're probably falling asleep. They probably need a little wakey so you can really fire them up even more and use them even more in your glute workouts. I really recommend doing 3 to 5 glute activation exercises prior to your leg day or booty day or whatever. It really is important to wake up those glute muscles, really focus on the mind to muscle connection. Some of my favorite glute activation exercises require this guy. So you can do stuff like crab walks where you step side to side, really great for waking up the side glutes as well. You can do like squat pulses, those lower glutes get super fired up, and then you've got kickbacks for those upper glutes, fire hydrants, hitting those side glutes again, glute bridges, really squeeze as you draw the hips up and draw the booty up as well. If you don't have a resistance band, you shouldn't just not do glute activation thinking, oh, there's no point, I don't have the band. That is not true. You can still wake up those booty cheeks without a resistance band. So just do the exact same movements that I've just described, except don't use the band. So when you're doing your glute bridges, squeezing the glutes upwards, just squeeze even harder. You should be squeezing as much as you can anyway with this guy, but yeah, just squeeze everything, get as low as you can, and really think about using the mind to muscle connection to fire up those muscles and get ready for your training session. Okay guys, so tip number 2 is all about diet. And whilst I am not a nutritionist, I will give you some rough sort of like advice and things that help me when growing my glutes. So firstly, to grow your glutes, you're obviously not going to be in a calorie deficit. That is mainly for burning fat, losing weight, and to grow your glutes, you're effectively gaining weight, but if you do it right, it will be muscle weight on your glutes. So you can get booty gains eating at maintenance. That's kind of what I do all the time. I just eat intuitively. But if you are someone who is naturally very thin, you might need to eat in a slight surplus to be able to get those real glute gains. High protein is going to be super key. So lean meats, fish, and then obviously there are lots of vegan options you can have that are high protein. I'll pop them on the screen now. Lots of complex carbs, things like brown rice, oats, whole grain bread, things that are going to keep you feeling nice and full for a long time. Lots of vegetables is super important too. I think with building your glutes, volume is key. So you need like quite a lot of food to be able to achieve glute gains, but you just need to do it smart. Obviously being in a surplus is wonderful because you get to eat more food. Obviously if you eat pizza every night, you're just gonna end up getting a fat bum, not a muscly, peachy, toned bum, which is what we all want, right? I just want to reiterate that whilst it is super important to have like a bang-on exercise regime, which we will talk about next, your diet is super important, and if you're not fueling yourself correctly, then you're not going to be making those gains. I would recommend having some sort of protein after you train your glutes. You can also take creatine, which is great for muscle growth as well, but you just have to be very committed to that and take that every single day, otherwise there's no point taking it. Whilst I'm not tracking macros personally, because I've done it in the past, I know what foods are high protein. It's definitely a process, and as you do it, it will become easier, it will just become second nature to you. Just focus on eating non-processed, high protein, voluminous, delicious meals, okay? So tip number 3, we are going to talk about exercises and your exercise regime. Obviously we've talked about preparing with your glute activation, we've talked about adapting your diet to suit the specific goal of growing your glutes, and now we're going to talk about some of the key exercises which you need to be including for leg glute growth. It's really hard to say and I don't know why. Okay, so I'm going to give you a quick rundown. If you are stuck on how to construct your own workout split, I have workout guides available on www.liveforl.com, but I will give you a little background information now. So I always start with my compound movements first, then my isolation movements after. Obviously it's in the name, the isolation movements isolate one like muscle group, whereas the compound bring in multiple muscle groups. So I find the compounds to be a lot more tiring, but your compounds are so important as like the foundations or basis of your workout, and then being able to go ahead and do your isolation movements after is really great for like getting the burn in for specific parts of your glutes. The main compounds which I could not live without are the squat. So many variations of the squat. We've got the conventional squat, we've got the sumo squat, we've got the pulse squat. You can do it with so many different pieces of equipment. You can use your conventional barbell on the squat rack or whatever. You can use dumbbells, you can use kettlebells. Honestly, there are so many variations of a squat. If you really hate using a squat rack, for example, that doesn't mean you should give up on your squat, because there are so many different ways you can do it. You can change your foot positioning, you can change how wide your stance is. Generally speaking, the wider your stance, the more it's going to hit your hammies. The closer the stance, I find it works my quads a lot more. Second up, we have the deadlift, which is a really great all-rounder. It really does get your whole body involved, but absolutely obliterates the hamstrings. So many different variations of the deadlift as well. You've got the conventional deadlift, the Romanian deadlift, sumo deadlift. You can do single leg deadlifts. So like I said with the squat, if there is a certain type of deadlift you don't enjoy, then that's fine. You can just try a different one. But personally, I think I like the conventional the best because you have like the most range of motion. I also like to be elevated on a plate and do one that way, because then you go down even lower and move up even higher. One thing I really love about the deadlift is that not only is it really firing up your glutes, hammies, quads, it also really works your back, and I just think it's really satisfying when you come to the top and you squeeze your back. I just love that. Okay, so my next exercise I want to talk about is my favorite glute exercise ever. I've talked about it before on this channel, but I definitely feel like years later it is still the holy grail of glute exercises, and I'm hoping you've guessed it already, but it is the hip thrust. It was really funny actually. I was watching my last like glute growth video that I did a while ago. I think it was like a couple of years ago, and I was talking about how I'd only just introduced hip thrusts because I was like too nervous to do them. Honestly, if you're feeling awkward about thrusting in a gym, just think about how great you'll feel when you're walking in with the peachiest bum ever, because they are so great. Honestly, they are like one of the very few exercises where you can just work your glutes right up until they like physically can't go anymore. So like with a squat, something else might give out first, like your knees might start to hurt, but with the hip thrust you are just literally pushing through those glutes, and the only thing that can really give out is your bum cheeks, because they are like quivering and like, oh, I can't go anymore. So yeah, you really do need to have these in your routine. I will always have some kind of squat, some kind of deadlift, and some kind of hip thrust. Next I want to talk about lunges. So lunges are such a great movement for your lower body development, because I find that when I'm in a lunge, not only is the back leg booty cheek being like worked and squeezed to its limit, the front leg, you can really feel it in your quad, and it is just the most satisfying thing. I just think like throwing 100 walking lunges onto the end of any lower body session is such a great way to round it off. The lunges are so fab for like rounding and sculpting your glutes into a really nice perky shape. There's also so many variations. We've got the Bulgarian split squat, which is almost kind of like a lunge. You have your back left leg like raised, and oh my god, this one is an absolute killer, but such a great one for your glutes for the same kind of reasons that the walking lunges, with the back leg and the front leg being worked in different ways. And then of course you can't forget some of my favorite isolation movements. So the donkey kicks, the kickbacks. You can do these on a cable machine, you can do these at home with a resistance band. I just think they are so great, particularly for firing up the upper glutes, the sort of kickback movements. And then you have like hydrants for the side glutes. All of these are such great isolation movements because you have really good stability. You're on your hands and knees, and then all you're doing is pushing your leg out, so you can really focus on squeezing it as you lift it, and then as you lift it outwards with the hydrants, you're just on all fours thinking, am I squeezing hard enough? So those are really, really good for like isolating particular muscles. And then some of my favorite isolation machines are the hip abduction machine. I just think it's so great for firing up these outer glutes, and you can do that with like a resistance band or lateral kicks holding a dumbbell on your leg, just things that really isolate the outer muscles here. I just think whilst it's super important to like get your compounds in, I do think the isolation movements are really important too, because they're what help you to get that fuller shape and like focus on areas that maybe aren't being hit as much in the compound list. Especially as well if you have like a glute imbalance, you could do like extra reps of kickbacks on your slightly smaller side and in an attempt to balance them out. So also I do think things like kickbacks and like the more girly movements do get a bit of jip, I don't know, for not being as effective. I think they are just as important, so please don't miss them out. They are really, really important for your glute growth. Okay guys, so now we are on to tip number 4. Now I've told you about some of my favorite exercises, I really want to emphasize the importance of putting them into a good routine. So whilst you might be including all of the best exercises, you're doing your squats, you're doing your hip thrusts and whatever, you can take it that step further and include training techniques which are great for building muscle mass. First up, I want to talk about supersets. So I feel like this is the most common, well-known one. So a superset is basically when you do 2 exercises consecutively and they work the same muscle groups. So I'll give you an example. One of my favorites is doing hip thrusts and then straight away going into banded glute bridges. This is super effective because it's almost like a double whammy of working the same muscle groups straight after each other, and it's just like super effective and will definitely help you with building that booty. I also love to throw some trisets in there, so I don't know, I kind of like call this a trio of exercises. Sometimes I'll do like 3 squat variations in a triset, so I'm not taking any rests in between, and then I'll like kind of alter them a bit. So the first one might be a conventional squat, then you do a pulse squat, and then you do a jump squat. No rest, burning your legs and your glutes, and it's just like super effective, super high intensity, and great for building that muscle. I also really love drop sets for growing the glutes. I think they're really fun. It's really satisfying to like sort of remove weight as you go through. It keeps you like focused, and I just think it's a great way to build muscle as well. So an example that I do sometimes, I will set up a line of kettlebells, heavy down to light, and you do some sumo squats with the kettlebells, and then after you've done your reps, you move on to the lighter weight and keep moving down until you get right to the lowest weight. You can do like 5 sets, and it's just like super fun. I think it's a really fun way of building muscle, so definitely something worth including in your booty growth program. I also find it really fun on the squat rack because it's really easy to remove the plates, and it just keeps it interesting, and obviously it is a really effective method of building muscle. A method that is kind of new to me but I'm loving it is German volume training, which is basically 10 reps for 10 sets, so 10 times 10. And it's really great for building muscle because you're working really fast pace, basically to exhaustion. So it works really well with things like hip thrusts, which lends itself really well to heavy lifting as well. So this is a great combination. Okay guys, so we are on to the 5th and final tip, which I think is probably one of the most important. It is progressive overload. You have probably heard about progressive overload. I have talked about it in my previous videos, but I feel like my knowledge is so much more expansive on this topic in particular now, so I'm really excited to share with you guys like what I've learned. In the past, I've talked about progressive overload being lifting more weight over time, and of course that is a type of progressive overload, but it is not the only type of progressive overload. Progressive overload just means doing more over time, and that doesn't mean just lifting more weight. It can also mean further range of motion, more repetitions, or the weight. Actually, if you are someone who really doesn't like heavy lifting, you hate heavy lifting, it's not the end of the world. Generally speaking, you will usually start with improving your form and achieving full range of motion, and then once that has been established, you can work on increasing your repetitions and your weight. Before I wrap up this video, I just want to emphasize that you need to do all of these things. You can't just pick one of them and hope that your glutes will be perfect and peachy and round and big and voluptuous. You really do need to incorporate all 5 of these things for it to be super effective. That's everything today. Thank you so much for tuning in. I love you guys so much. Please let me know in the comments if there are any other videos you would like to see, what you thought of this one. Give it a big thumbs up, hit that big red subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time. Mwah.